Welcome to Wait, Ask Me Another. While answers and advice often appear as the best solutions to ease our suffering, curiosity is truly the cure for all things that ail us. It is the one remedy others will openly accept, and once they start to experience its impact, they will stop you and request, "Wait, ask me another."
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Wait, Ask Me Another. This is Terza and Jenny. We are so excited to be here with you today. And on this topic, we're really going to go a little deep. So hang with us. It is going to be worth your while as we ask this particular question. Do we really give ourselves permission to change? So, Jenny, change is a huge topic because it is constant in our lives, punctuated by usually these change events that propel us forward or backward, depending on our orientation to what's happening in our life. And so I hear all of this great stuff about um, time to make a change, how to make a change, when to make a change. But I think there's a conversation that doesn't happen on the back end of when we have changed our external, when we have decided to do something different in our lives. Do we ever take the time to answer this question of, have I really given myself permission to change? Do I even know if what I am attempting to do is worth changing?
Well, and I also think inside of that is, do we know enough that there are other options? Like, can you even give yourself permission if you don't realize that, wait a second, in this situation, that's not the only option?
Right, right.
I think it becomes so invisible to us, which makes me think of there's a book called Think Again, and in it there's two different elements. One's a story about these firefighters that as they were fighting this fire, they never considered they had to run up the mountain. And the training was so ingrained in them of, you do not drop your tools, that you will need those and they are a part of your body now. That as they were running for their lives, they didn't consider that if I drop these tools, I would make it to the top of the mountain. I would be able to run away from the flames. And so all these individuals, they believe, would have survived if they would have simply considered that this is the one time you don't have to take them with you.
Right, right.
And then
Wow.
there's another story in there, and I think a lot of people can relate to this because most of us have been taught this, is that when we were kids, we were told, when you take a test, go with your first answer. But now there's been all this research proving that that is not the best response, that the best response is, once you answer it, go back. And if you have anything that you question, go back and reconsider, because you're in your thought process or your reconsideration of your answer, you'll come up with a better answer.
I love that because I think this is exactly what we're asking people to do, right? When we say we give ourselves permission to change, we treat it like it's a one time change event
Mm-hmm.
rather than saying, at some point, you might have to go back and reconsider the option that you took, or look into what is underneath, what is now changing because of that option, and where are my pressure points that might make me be questioning, because it might be the right answer, but what are the things that I'm looking for that tell me, yes, I believe that this is the right answer, and I give myself permission to stand in this answer, as opposed to doing what I know I was guilty of for years, which was every single time I saw something that kind of questioned my new choice that I'd made for my life, I'd run around thinking, oh gosh, what if I did this wrong? What if this isn't it? What if all the what ifs? And I
Right.
spent years doing that because I didn't understand that when I gave myself that permission or that to make the decision to do life differently, there would be a lot of times where things came up and questioned that. And I needed to consider what my response would be.
Well, so Teresa, you told me the other day you were talking about even in your family that piece of part of the tools that were handed to you
Mhm.
were that you are present at
Yeah.
every event. You are part of this community, which means you show up a certain way and you show up to everything.
Yes. And actually, it's so hilarious that you mentioned that because so I have a wonderful cousin and his wife who are pregnant, and turns out she's going to be induced like in 2 days. And the response that I got, so I went over to visit with them. They live an hour away during traffic from me. And so I went over to visit with them. It was a fantastic visit. Um, and so then I was talking with my aunt, who's there with them now. And her response was, I'll send you a message so you can come over, you know, when the baby is born. And there were two ways to interpret that. So that you can come over afterward and hold the baby and celebrate with family. But I think just again, the way that she has been with me and the rules that were established for how we interact as a family, were like, no, you can come to the hospital.
Mm.
So my initial reaction, I looked at my calendar for the week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are packed. There is no way that
Right.
I'm going to be able to get to the hospital. Past Terza would have spun in a story of I will disappoint her. I will disappoint her. She'll think that I'm not dedicated, you know, and even honestly, in a point of like, oh my gosh, did I get overly involved in this relationship with my cousin and his wife? But I had to give myself permission to change. Like I had
Mm.
to re-give myself that permission because my recent story with family has been I will care as much as I can and that there are boundaries around my time. Right. And so that was, I'd made that decision a long time ago, but it took me years to get to the point where I get a text message like that and I can reinterpret it and say, and send back, I will show up as soon as I'm able to. I'm so excited, so
Mhm.
happy.
Well,
Right.
what did you have to stumble over many times to get to a response like that?
Oh, absolutely. They didn't even have to be in the room. They were between my ears. The
Mm.
judgment, right? The idea that there is a way that this family shows its affection, and it is by, for whatever reason, me, the at that time single niece, without a family or whatever have you, always being a on demand available resource.
Mhm.
And that if I didn't do that, I would be disappointing people. And that's so hard for me. But I would scan everything through that lens. Absolutely everything through that lens. So when I decided that that's just not the way it's going to be anymore, that was great. That was great. I made a choice. Dun, 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 right? Like I'm a 6-year old. I made a choice.
Yes.
But I never gave myself permission to live in that choice
Yeah.
for years.
Well, and even in that, and I think this happens to all of us, is that that story was tied to a different time in your life. I am single. I'm
Mhm,
the single niece. And so it's easy for disappointment to be tied to other people outside of your nuclear family. But then if you think about now you have your own children, your husband, all these other things that do we realize that that story, that disappointment has shifted.
mhm,
If I worry so much about disappointing them, what happens to the disappointment inside my core family?
mhm, mhm. Well, I think that gets to a really good point, Jenny, about when we are handed a lot of our rules
Mhm.
around not just behavior, but belief. Uh, And we're not getting into the realm of therapy, but I hear a lot just in cultural zeitgeist, people who have never been to a therapist will say, like, I'm discovering my inner child, right? And why are people going back to that place? Well, because we're not born acontextually. So I believe that people are saying, there's rules that I was handed, and there's rules that I picked up along the way, promises I made to myself, vows that I made to myself. But the vow that you make at 7 doesn't necessarily work for the choices you're making at 17. And the vows you made at 17 don't necessarily work for the choices you're making at 27 or 47. But if we never examine them, here I am trying to change my life eh, while but I'm still using the same old receptors when I'm scanning for whether or not this change is acceptable to those around me. And that's why I love that second question that we had, do we really know what's worth changing? Because really what we're asking is, when I make that change, I might not get that same evidence, right? That when I scan, I might not receive something that supports the change. So do I know what I'm standing in and what's worth standing for? And how will I adjust, give myself permission, adjust what I look for to tell me that, hey, life is okay. And
Yeah.
I'm doing it, and I'm doing it well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think those invisible strings are so tightly um, wound around us that we don't understand that I can undo one of those and I can tie it a different way. And I just think about, even as you were talking, T, that I think when I had Tanner, so a bajillion years ago, when I had this child, I had him by myself. And so I established a lot of rules that you have to be tough. You have to stand on your own. You have to be independent. You have to, like, all these rules. I never like checked them out. And I like thought, okay. And then I get married after that. And I think I applied those same rules to marriage. Like, if you don't like what I do, then I will fight back, because I'm fighting for this independence, this whatever it is. And I also had somebody that he didn't know he established some crazy rules along the way either.
Right.
And we never had a conversation about it. So it just like got bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point that we didn't know how to be with each other. And then I think this last year, I'm like, wait a second. I had moved so far away that I physically moved away from him. And then I had to reevaluate, what are the rules I want to live by?
Mm.
Who do I want to be? And what rules trump what rules? And I decided that love trumped freedom. And I also had to redefine what freedom was,
Hmm.
and independence, and all those pieces. And then I had to I had to establish different rules with Pete, but I also had to establish different rules with myself of, when something happened, I couldn't decide that A equaled B. If he responded to me negatively, I couldn't decide that that meant he doesn't care. This meant that he was confused.
Yeah.
And could I, going back to even why we created this podcast, is, could I be curious? Could I be curious inside of this and ask questions rather than conclude? And I had to start scanning for different pieces of, if this is the person I want to be, that person looks for different evidence to
Mm.
reestablish this individual. And it goes back to your question, that second one that we have, is that really what is worth changing? And then that piece of inside of that, what if I assumed to be so that is worth questioning? And I think society hands us so many things that no, this is how it is.
Yeah. Not
Like,
only is this how it is, but I will give you no time. There's no evaluation time.
yes.
Yeah. There's so much inside of what you said. One of the things that hit me is just the idea of even looking for, like, what do I look for to tell me something's worth it? What
Mm,
am I looking for? And how am I defining things? I always tell people, if you don't know where to start, take a promise that you've made to yourself and then look at the definition of the words inside the promise. I will never XYZ.
mm,
What is it? What is X? What is Y? What is Z? What are those things to you? When did I determine that these were bad or good or worthwhile or not? I will give my own personal testimony. When I first came to learning journeys, what did I always say, Jenny? I will not step into another beige boardroom.
ah, yes, you did.
Oh, that was my mantra. And it served me for a while. And then it didn't serve me. But let me tell you, when I'm in a beige boardroom, I have to look around and say, what does this represent to me now versus what it represented to me when I left my last employer? Because
Mhm.
I cannot use that same definition. And the thing is, it's not being true to yourself or going back on your word, which I think a lot of us think. It's recognizing that growth has taken place and change has taken place. And this is what I need for myself now. Uh,
Right.
so the other thing that I think is interesting is some of this, again, I want to get to that pace of life piece. It is worth it if you can, however you can. I would say make time, take time, steal time if you must. When I say steal time, it's more like borrowing from the spaces that are unused or used poorly,
Mm.
which is why YouTube is no longer on my phone.
Yeah, this is coming from the same person that sent me a YouTube link the other day.
I still look at YouTubes, but with that app on my phone, I'm not just
Okay. I'll
like
give you credit then.
scrolling for hours. It was a bad thing. It was a bad situation. Um, but to be able to either internally or externally, and here's what I'll say about either one. Internally, it might just be that I give myself permission to think without any hold bar, be curious, ask questions. So this was my vow that I made to myself. When did I make that? What about that? How's it been working? Right?
Mm.
Some people do it while they're driving. Don't space out, but but multitask a little bit there possibly. Otherwise, you can do it. Some people journal. Um, I see people journal all the time and say journaling is such a great practice. But why? Why is it a great practice? Well, because it's allowing you to do these things. And some of us have to get really creative. And so I am going to share about my proof jar. When I became an entrepreneur, I learned how to be a successful business person, a successful person in an organization by doing tasks, by accomplishing tasks and projects. And now I'm an entrepreneur. And I'm not quite sure what writing a piece that I may or may not use for an hour, how
Mm.
that success. And so I literally, for about a year, had a large mason jar. And when I did anything, I would have to like write it down and I put a little date on it and I stuck it in my jar. And then when I was feeling really down on myself, I would dump the jar out and read all the things that I did. And I'd stick them back in the jar or I'd archive them or whatever I did because the jar was getting kind of full. But that was a way. It was a way for me to continuously give myself permission to live in the change that I had made for myself. Otherwise, I would jump right back to the scanning that I was given when I was younger, which was make good grades. right? Accomplish something that somebody else recognizes. But
Right.
me sitting in my office slash bedroom um, for hours, nobody else was going to recognize that. So,
Well, and people are so quick at handing us, well, it should look this way. It should be this. And if we can sit in asking ourselves, what is my formula? What is and is there an expiration date to this?
mhm, mhm,
Because like you said before, the rules I established at 7 didn't apply at 17, nor did they apply at 27. Yet when do we go back and be like, "No, maybe I can question this.
right.
And what do I want to be curious about?" And I think it where to start even with the questioning is paying attention to um what nudges you to say, hey, this might not be working.
Mhm. Right. I love that one. Yeah.
And
So,
while everybody around you is doing it a certain way, it doesn't mean you have to do it that way.
right. Are we giving them permission?
Yeah.
Yeah. We give you permission to give yourself permission.
So let's permission this. Yes. Well, otherwise, what you're doing is you're giving everybody else your permission.
Mhm.
You're giving them permission to run your life.
Right. And it's amazing. It's amazing how, oh gosh, how insidious that can be. One
Mhm.
more little story that I'll have, and I'll uh, let us take it home. But uh, for the longest time, I would not exercise. I would say, when people ask, "Oh, do you exercise?" I was like, "No, I don't believe in running." And they never asked me about running, but it was a cute little quip that I would say, "I only run toward food and away from danger." Um, then I decided when my children were like 2 and 1 that I would do the Couch to 5K app, right? And I never did make it to a 5K. But what I discovered was I didn't hate running. Y'all
Mm.
have to understand, I went into this anticipating I would hate every single moment that I was out there. And then I didn't. And I was just like, ah, nuts. Like, why? I wanted to hate it so bad. So then I had to do a little bit of discovery, like a little bit of looking at myself and say, why did I say that? Well, because I've always been kind of a stockier kid. And I decided at like, must have been like 9 or 10, that if I lost weight, that would give permission to people to talk about what I looked like. And I didn't want people to talk about what I looked like because I was smart, right?
Mhm.
And I stuck with this for years. I mean, I'm giving little old ladies at church in 1990, whatever, permission to run my life. Holy macaroni. Like when I realized that, I was just like, what are we doing? What are
Yeah.
we doing here?
Yeah. How crazy it is. I thought you were going to say that you liked your quick response that you you didn't want to give that up, but
That's true. I didn't want to give that up either because it's a great response. It
it
usually
is.
go in a head tilt.
Yeah. But yeah, and we all have, I think, but going back to even time, we all have quick responses to serve us, that keeps us in time with, well, this is, I don't have time for that. I don't have, and so I'll slot this saying and this way of responding. And then, yeah, you you start to pick up stories that you didn't even check out because they served that situation.
Right, right. Well, we are to the end of our time today, but we have had a fantastic time
Yeah.
hanging out with you and talking about this subject. And if you want to continue, go ahead and check out where the links are, and you'll see where you can connect with our curious coaching, our curious questions for you. That curious question resource guide. to be able to give you just some insight into yourself. If you're like, that was a lot of questions, I don't even know where to start. It's a
Right,
great place to start
right.
uh, on your journey. And so, um, I don't know, Jenny, what do you think? Do we give ourselves permission to change?
I think we need to.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the question to sit with is what is worth giving yourself permission for?